Until about 20 years ago or so, the absolute gold standard advice from pediatricians was that giving a 6-month-old baby peanut butter was basically a recipe for disaster.
Oh, absolutely. It was treated like a massive risk.
Right. I mean, the medical community actively warned parents to guard their infants. You were supposed to build this protective moat around them, and delay any exposure to common allergens until they were 2 or 3 years old.
Which is wild to think about now.
It really is. Because today, if you read the latest medical guidelines, they will tell you that withholding that peanut butter is the actual danger. The advice hasn't just tweaked a little bit, it has completely fundamentally inverted.
And that leaves a lot of parents feeling like they have severe whiplash.
Oh, totally.
Because you're always told to, follow the science. But when the science pulls a hard 180, it creates this environment of intense anxiety.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
We've gone from protect the fragile immune system at all costs to actively train the immune system. And honestly, the mechanics of how we got there are just fascinating.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are unpacking a source document that is incredibly dense, deeply practical, and honestly essential for anyone navigating this phase of human development.
It really is a must-read.
Yeah. It's simply titled, Introducing Your Baby to Solids. So for those of you listening who are currently staring down a high chair, or maybe you're just fascinated by how the human body learns to operate, our mission today is to cut through the massive mountain of conflicting advice.
Because there is a mountain of it out there.
So much of it. We are going to extract the actual biological, nutritional, and psychological mechanisms driving these modern guidelines.
What's fascinating here is that the moment you understand the underlying machinery, like the actual why and how a baby's body processes food, the day-to-day decisions about what to feed them become infinitely clearer.
Right. It takes the guesswork out of it.
Exactly. We're looking at a major inflection point. For the first half year of a baby's life, you're largely managing mere survival.
Just keeping them fed and clean.
Right, because the baby operates on innate reflexes. But introducing solid food is the moment you begin managing a human being's autonomy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're moving from an automatic response like instinctively sucking on a bottle to intentionally engaging with the physical world around them.
Okay, let's unpack this transition, starting with probably the most famous rule in the baby feeding universe, the 6-month mark.
Ah, yes, the magic number.
The magic number. If you spend any time on parenting forums, 6 months is treated like a starting gun.
It really is.
Parents will literally watch the clock, waiting for midnight on the baby's 6-month half birthday, just to crack open a jar of sweet potatoes.
Which is completely understandable given the messaging out there.
Right. But our source material frames this completely differently. 6 months isn't a hard starting line. It's an illusion.
A total illusion. Age is really just a number on a calendar, whereas readiness to consume solid food is this highly complex biological symphony.
So why do we use 6 months at all, then?
Well, the 6-month guideline exists because statistically, that is roughly the time when 4 distinct biological systems finally mature and align in the human body.
Right.
But relying purely on the calendar is dangerous. Biological development just doesn't care about the date on your phone.
Reading through this, I kept picturing a slot machine. If you're listening to this and you've ever played the slots, you know you need all the icons to line up perfectly across the center before the machine actually pays out.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah, like if you get 3 cherries and a lemon, you don't win. For a baby, you need 4 specific biological cherries to align before you hit the jackpot of being safely ready for food.
Precisely. If one system is lagging, the whole system fails.
So let's walk through the mechanics of these 4 systems,
Okay.
starting with the neurological component. The text highlights something called the fading of the tongue thrust reflex.
Right. Also known as the extrusion reflex.
Okay.
When a baby is born, their mouth is essentially a specialized vacuum designed exclusively for liquid.
A vacuum. I love that.
It's true. If anything solid touches their lips or the front third of their tongue, the tongue automatically acts like a bulldozer, just thrusting forward to push the object out.
Which is a brilliant evolutionary defense mechanism against choking, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It keeps a newborn from accidentally swallowing a stray button or like a piece of lint. But how does that reflex actually fade, and what replaces it?
It's a process of neurological pruning and motor mapping.
Neurological pruning.
Yeah. So for the first few months, the cranial nerves controlling the tongue are wired for a front-to-back stripping motion. That's how they extract milk.
Okay, that makes sense.
But around 4 to 6 months, the brain begins to wire entirely new pathways for lateral tongue movements.
Lateral meaning side to side.
Exactly. The baby has to neurologically learn to accept a foreign object, hold it in the center of the mouth, use the tongue to move it to the side to mash it, and then intentionally gather it into a ball.
A ball of food.
Right, what we call bolus.
Yeah.
They have to gather it and push it backward to trigger a swallow.
Wha-
If you try to feed a baby before that bulldozer reflex powers down, you aren't actually feeding them. You are just scraping puree off their chin for 20 minutes while their brain automatically rejects the spoon.
I'm sure every parent listening is nodding right now thinking about the scraped chin puree routine.
Oh, we've all been there.
So the bulldozer has to power down. That's cherry number 1. Cherry number 2 is postural.
Right, trunk control.
The text states they need to be able to sit upright with minimal support. But I want to dig into the physics of this. Why is trunk control so non-negotiable for eating?
It basically comes down to gravity and the architecture of the human airway.
Okay.
The pathway for food and the pathway for air sit dangerously close to one another in the throat.
Yeah, a design flaw of the human body, frankly.
You could say that. When you swallow, a tiny flap of cartilage called the epiglottis has to flip down to cover your windpipe.
Right, directing the food into the esophagus.
Exactly. And this requires millisecond precision. If a baby lacks core muscle strength and is slouching, or, say, they're leaning too far back,
Gravity works against them.
gravity works completely against that coordinated swallow. The food or liquid can slip backward before the epiglottis has time to secure the airway.
Which drastically increases the risk of aspiration.
Exactly. They need that rigid trunk stability to anchor the neck muscles, which in turn allows the swallowing muscles to fire correctly.
That makes perfect sense. You can't safely operate the plumbing if the pipes are bent at a weird angle.
That's a very accurate way to put it.
So we have the neurological tongue thrust fading, and we have the postural core strength. Cherry number 3 on our biological slot machine is the gag reflex.
This is a big one.
Yeah, I've always thought of the gag reflex as a static defense system. Like, you had it, it stays there, it keeps you from choking, but the source notes that it physically migrates.
Yes, and the mechanics of this migration are incredible to watch.
Really?
Yeah. In a newborn infant, the sensory receptors that trigger a gag are located very far forward on the tongue, almost near the lips.
So anything touches the front of the mouth, they gag.
Exactly. Again, highly protective. But as the baby mouths their hands, their toys, and eventually food, that tactile stimulation slowly desensitizes the front of the tongue.
Huh.
The trigger zone for the gag reflex literally moves backward, deeper into the mouth.
Creating a sort of sensory safe zone in the front of the mouth.
Yes, exactly. A sweet spot, as pediatric occupational therapists call it.
I like that.
The gag reflex remains intact in the back of the throat to protect against genuine choking, obviously.
Right, you still need it back there.
But the front of the mouth becomes a tolerance zone where the baby can explore the texture and temperature of food without immediately retching.
Wow.
If that reflex didn't migrate, the baby could never tolerate the sensory input of a piece of broccoli or even a spoon long enough to figure out how to chew it.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And the final cherry, system number 4, happens entirely out of sight, right? The digestive and immune system?
Yes, the gut lining has to mature.
So what is physically changing in the stomach and intestines around that 6-month mark?
We have to look at the cellular level of the gut. A newborn's intestinal lining is naturally highly permeable.
Permeable, meaning things can pass through easily.
Right. The cells have microscopic gaps between them, often referred to as a leaky gut.
And that's a bad thing.
Usually, yes. But for a newborn, this is intentional by design.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It allows the large immune-boosting macromolecules in breast milk, like maternal antibodies, to pass directly through the intestinal wall and into the baby's bloodstream.
So the gates are wide open to let the good stuff in?
Precisely. But if you introduce complex solid foods while those gates are still open, large undigested food proteins can slip right through the intestinal wall and enter the bloodstream.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The infant's immune system recognizes these foreign proteins as invaders and mounts an attack.
Which is the foundational mechanism of a food allergy.
Exactly. Food allergy or severe gastrointestinal distress. However, right around 6 months, the body begins a process called gut closure.
Gut closure.
The cells in the intestinal lining form what are known as tight junctions, essentially sealing those gaps,
Closing the gates.
closing the gates. Simultaneously, the pancreas ramps up production of specific digestive enzymes.
Like what?
like amylase to break down carbohydrates and proteases to break down proteins.
So, if a well-meaning parent starts feeding a baby rice cereal at 4 months just because the baby happens to be staring at their dinner plate,
Which happens all the time.
right, they are risking a lot under the hood. They are risking aspiration because of the posture, they are fighting the tongue reflex, and they are dropping complex carbohydrates into a highly permeable gut that doesn't even have the amylase enzymes to break them down yet.
It's a recipe for disaster. And conversely, waiting too late carries its own set of biological penalties.
Wait, really? Being too cautious is bad too.
Yes. If a parent is anxious and delays solids until, say, 8 or 9 months, they risk missing a critical window for oral motor development.
Oh, because the muscles aren't practicing.
Right. The muscles of the jaw and tongue need the resistance of solid food to build the strength required for later speech development.
I never connected chewing to speech.
It's heavily connected. Furthermore, they miss the prime window for immune system mapping, which we will definitely explore later.
Okay, so if the 6-month mark is simply the statistical average for when all 4 of these massive biological systems, the tongue, the posture, the gag, the gut, finally align,
Right.
what is driving that timeline? Why did human evolution settle on 6 months as the inflection point?
That's the million-dollar question.
If biology is a machine, what is the fuel gauge telling us? That brings us to our second major concept, the baby's internal nutritional ticking clock.
Yes.
And the mainspring of that clock is iron.
Iron is the master key to this entire developmental stage.
Okay, unpack that for us.
But to understand why, you have to look at what happens in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy.
Before they're even born.
Exactly. During those final weeks in utero, the fetus is rapidly pulling iron from the mother's bloodstream and stockpiling it in their own liver.
Think of it like a spacecraft loading up its fuel tanks right before it detaches from the mothership.
I love that analogy.
Because once that umbilical cord is cut, there is no way to refuel those massive internal tanks for a while.
That is an incredibly apt way to put it. The baby is born with a finite biological savings account of iron.
Okay.
And for the first 6 months of life, the baby's growth rate is astronomical. I mean, they are doubling their birth weight, expanding their blood volume, and most importantly, growing their brain.
Which requires iron.
Iron is a non-negotiable building block for all of this.
Yeah.
It is required to synthesize hemoglobin, which carries oxygen to the cells, and it is absolutely critical for myelination.
Myelination.
It's the process of coating the brain's neurons with a protective sheath so signals can travel quickly.
The brain is basically laying down miles and miles of broadband cable, and it needs iron to build the insulation.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah. But wait, here's where I have a major question about biological design.
Okay, let's hear it.
If breast milk is the evolutionary gold standard for infant nutrition, if it's this perfectly engineered dynamic fluid, why doesn't it just provide the iron?
It's a great question.
Why does the baby's internal tank run dry?
It seems like a massive design flaw at first glance,
Yeah.
but it's actually a brilliant piece of evolutionary warfare.
Warfare.
Yeah. Human breast milk is indeed very low in iron. It contains a highly bioavailable form of iron, but the sheer quantity is tiny. And that is totally intentional,
Why would it be intentional to starve them of iron?
because many dangerous pathogenic bacteria require free-floating iron to survive and multiply in the gut.
Oh.
Breast milk contains a specialized protein called lactoferrin.
Lactoferrin.
Right, and lactoferrin binds tightly to whatever small amount of iron is present, making it available to the baby, but completely unavailable to the bacteria.
Wow.
Essentially, breast milk starves the bad bacteria of iron.
So keeping the iron levels low in the milk protects the newborn from massive bacterial infections while their immune system is still primitive.
Exactly. The body relies on the liver's preloaded iron vault to supply the baby's systemic needs while keeping the digestive tract relatively iron-free to prevent infection.
That is incredibly smart.
Biology usually is, but by the time the baby reaches 6 months, that protective strategy hits a mathematical wall.
The savings account runs empty.
The liver savings account runs empty. The biological demand for iron completely outpaces the supply.
Which means they have to get it from an external source.
Right.
Solid food, iron-fortified cereals, pureed meats, lentils. The introduction of solids is perfectly timed by biology to restock the fuel tanks just as the warning light flashes.
It's perfectly synced, usually.
Usually.
Yeah.
But this brings up a massive tension in the source material. What happens if the timeline fractures?
This is where things get tricky.
Right. Let's say we have a baby. They hit the 6-month calendar mark.
Yeah.
Their internal iron vault is completely depleted. But they haven't hit the biological jackpot. They can't sit up independently, and their tongue is still thrusting everything out.
The bulldozer is still on.
Exactly. If biology is demanding iron, but the baby's muscles are barely coordinated enough to swallow, how do we physically bridge that gap without causing a choking hazard?
This is the exact dilemma that causes so much anxiety in pediatric clinics.
I bet.
You have the nutritional clock screaming now and the developmental reality lagging behind. But the medical guidance here is unequivocal.
Yeah.
You never, ever rush developmental readiness just to solve a nutritional deficit.
Airway safety always supersedes nutrition.
You don't compromise a child's breathing for a spoonful of pureed beef.
Yeah.
Never.
Wow, okay.
If baby lacks that trunk stability, feeding them solids is not only a severe choking hazard,
Yeah.
it is highly inefficient.
Because they can't even get it down.
Exactly. A baby who is slouching and thrusting their tongue will not actually swallow enough of the iron-rich food to move the needle on their iron levels anyway. You'll just frustrate the child and terrify yourself.
So what are the bridge solutions? How do we refuel the spaceship if the cargo bay doors won't open?
The source text outlines specific, safe bridges. If the infant is receiving formula, modern infant formulas are heavily fortified with iron.
Oh, problem solved right there.
That alone usually covers the gap, completely removing the pressure to start solids before the baby is posturally ready.
But what if they are exclusively breastfed, which means they are still on that low iron evolutionary diet?
In that scenario, a pediatrician will step in and prescribe liquid iron supplement drops.
Just drop straight in the mouth.
Basically, this is a highly calculated, weight-based dose of iron that you can slip directly into the baby's cheek pouch or mix into a bottle of pumped milk.
Ah.
It solves the biochemical deficit instantly, without requiring the baby to perform complex oral motor skills.
And the text is very careful to note that this is a medical intervention, not a DIY project.
Very important distinction.
Iron is one of a few areas where a deficiency has permanent, irreversible developmental consequences. We're talking cognitive delays and altered motor skills due to a lack of that myelin insulation in the brain.
Right.
But at the same time, you cannot just free pour iron supplements into a baby.
No, please don't. Iron toxicity is a very real, very dangerous possibility.
Yeah, really?
Oversupplementation can cause severe gastrointestinal bleeding and liver damage. It's a Goldilocks nutrient.
Needs to be just right.
It requires precise pediatric calculation. You use the bridge, the fortified formula or the calculated drops to support the brain and the blood, and you simply wait for the baby's core muscles to strengthen.
And once they can sit up, you introduce the food.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's assume we've navigated the waiting game. The iron is managed, the slot machine has hit all 4 cherries.
Lift off.
The baby is sitting upright, the tongue thrust is gone, the gut is sealed, we are ready for liftoff. The next immediate practical hurdle is how to physically get the food into this tiny squirming person.
And here we go.
And if you are listening to this as a parent, you know this is where the internet arguments start. We are stepping into the great philosophical divide of modern feeding methods. Purees versus baby-led weaning.
It is a topic that generates an astonishing amount of passion, rigid rules, and unfortunately, judgment.
Let's break down the 2 camps mechanically. On one side, we have the traditional puree method.
Classic approach.
This is what most of us grew up with. The parent holds a spoon, the food is blended into a perfectly smooth liquid or paste, think single-grain rice cereal or pureed carrots, and the parent guides it into the baby's mouth.
Right.
It offers the parent total control over volume, it minimizes the mess, but the baby is essentially a passive passenger.
And on the other side of the spectrum is baby-led weaning, commonly abbreviated as BLW.
BLW, right.
This method radically suggests skipping purees entirely. From day 1 of eating, you offer the baby soft, graspable, finger-length pieces of whole food.
Like what?
A spear of roasted sweet potato, a thick strip of steak, a floret of steamed broccoli. The parent provides the food, but the baby must physically pick it up, bring it to their mouth, and gnaw on it.
Which requires an entirely different set of motor skills, right?
A vastly more complex set. At 6 months, babies typically use a palmar grasp, meaning they rake an object into their palm and close all their fingers around it like a fist.
Okay.
The food has to be cut into long strips so that it sticks out of the top and bottom of their fist, allowing them to bite off the exposed ends.
That makes sense.
Eventually, this practice forces them to develop the pincer grasp, using the tips of the index finger and thumb to pick up small objects like a single pea.
Oh, the pincer grasp, yeah.
ALW forces rapid neurological mapping of hand-eye coordination and spatial awareness.
But it also features a massive amount of mess, and for the parent, an incredibly high level of anxiety about choking, which we'll get into.
Oh, the anxiety is real.
I was trying to conceptualize these two camps, and it struck me that it's a lot like choosing a travel style for a vacation.
Okay, let's hear the analogy.
Purees feel like booking a tightly scheduled guided bus tour. As the parent, you are the tour guide holding the umbrella.
Right.
You control the itinerary, you ensure they see the Eiffel Tower, or in this case, swallow the iron-fortified oatmeal, and you get great photos without anyone getting dirty. It's highly secure, but the baby is just looking out the window.
That captures the dynamic perfectly.
And baby-led weaning.
Baby-led weaning is like dropping the baby in the middle of a bustling foreign city, handing them a map and saying, good luck, find your own dinner.
Yes.
They might get completely lost. They will definitely get dirty. They might only end up eating a piece of dry bread off a cafe table.
But they're interacting.
Exactly. They're interacting with the environment on their own terms. They're learning how to navigate the city.
If we look closely at the psychology of those two travel styles, we uncover the exact trade-off our source document highlights. This debate isn't actually about spoons versus fingers.
Not at all.
Underneath the mechanics, it is a profound philosophical choice between control versus exploration.
I love that. Tell me more about the psychology of that choice.
Well, when a parent chooses exclusive purees, the underlying message they are broadcasting to their own nervous system and to the child is, I will ensure you are nourished. I bear the full responsibility for your caloric intake.
Right, it's very protective.
It comes from a place of deep, protective love, often fueled by anxiety over weight percentiles and growth charts. The spoon is an instrument of assurance.
And what about the other side?
But when a parent chooses baby-led weaning, the message fundamentally shifts to, I am responsible for providing safe boundaries and healthy options, but you are responsible for nourishing yourself.
Wow.
It places the autonomy, the pacing, and the decision-making squarely in the hands of a 6-month-old infant.
Which is terrifying if you have spent the last 6 months measuring exactly 4.5 ounces of formula into a bottle every 3 hours.
Literally terrifying. With BLW, you watch a baby squish a piece of avocado into their ear, drop half of it to the dog, and you have absolutely no statistical data on whether they consumed a single milligram of nutrition.
It requires a monumental leap of faith.
It really does.
It requires trusting the child's innate biological drive to self-regulate. But let's look at the sub-debate within the puree camp itself, because the source document spends time unpacking this.
Ah, yes.
If you choose purees, you face the split between homemade and store-bought.
Right. Homemade purees require steaming, blending, and freezing in tiny silicone trays.
A labor of love.
You get absolute control over the ingredients. You can introduce complex flavor profiles like rosemary and butternut squash, but it is a massive time sink.
Huge time sink.
Store-bought jars and modern silicone pouches are the pinnacle of convenience, but the text issues a strong warning about something called flavor flattening.
Yes, flavor flattening.
What is happening biochemically with these commercial foods?
Commercial purees, especially the pouches, undergo extreme heat processing to remain shelf-stable for months.
Okay.
That heat destroys a lot of the volatile aromatic compounds that give food its distinct flavor. To compensate, manufacturers often use fruit puree, specifically apple or pear, as the base for everything.
Oh, that makes sense.
So you buy a pouch labeled spinach, kale, and beef. But the first ingredient is actually apple puree.
Which is super sweet.
Right. The baby's developing taste receptors are constantly bathed in an overwhelming sweetness, flattening out the distinct bitter or savory notes of the actual vegetable.
So they aren't learning what spinach tastes like, they are learning what green-tinted applesauce tastes like.
Precisely. And the pouch delivery system creates another mechanical issue, pouch dependency.
Pouch dependency?
Yeah. If a baby spends months simply sucking a homogeneous paste out of a plastic nozzle, they aren't practicing the lateral tongue movements or the jaw strength needed to chew.
They're just doing the vacuum thing again.
They were just extending that newborn sucking reflex. This can lead to a delay in oral motor skills and speech articulation.
Again with the speech.
Because speech requires the exact same jaw and tongue precision as chewing complex textures.
So the extreme end of purees risks blunting their palate and their jaw muscles, while the extreme end of BLW risks the parent having a nervous breakdown over the mess and the unpredictable intake.
That sums it up.
So what is the solution? Where does the source text actually guide us?
It guides us to the quiet reality of most households. Despite the loud, polarized arguments on social media, the text reveals that the vast majority of families naturally drift into a hybrid approach.
Yeah, take the middle path.
The middle path is where practicality meets biology.
Right.
On a chaotic Tuesday evening, a parent is very likely going to load up a spoon with iron-fortified oatmeal or full-fat yogurt and guide it into the baby's mouth to ensure a solid baseline of critical
That
nutrients.
makes sense.
But simultaneously, they will drop a soft spear of roasted zucchini onto the high chair tray for the baby to smash, inspect, and practice that palmar grasp.
You take the guided bus tour in the morning to make sure you see the important landmarks, and you let them backpack off the grid in the afternoon.
That hybrid approach provides the parent with nutritional confidence while still honoring the baby's need for tactile exploration and fine motor skill development.
It sounds much more sane.
It is the most sustainable reality.
Okay, so whether you are loading up a silicone spoon with homemade puree or handing over a spear of steamed broccoli, what exactly should that food consist of?
The menu.
Yes, the menu. This is where I want to dismantle some massive, multi-generational myths about the very first foods a human should consume. Because looking at this text, the modern scientific guidance has completely inverted what our parents and grandparents were told.
It truly is a paradigm shift in pediatric nutrition.
Let's start with the priority of the menu. We just spent significant time discussing the biological iron clock and the depletion of the infant's internal reserves. So it mathematically follows that the absolute highest priority for early foods are iron-rich sources.
Unquestionably.
We are talking about pureed beef, dark meat chicken, lentils, fortified grain cereals. We are not talking about the traditional parade of rice cereal followed by applesauce and mashed bananas.
Fruit and vegetables are undeniably wonderful for exposing the baby to various vitamins and fibrous textures, but they do absolutely nothing to solve the ticking biological clock of the iron deficit.
They just don't have the iron.
Exactly. Heme iron from animal sources and non-heme iron from legumes must be the heavy hitters on the menu from day one.
And then there is the pacing of the menu. If you asked anyone from previous generations, the golden rule of baby food was introduce one new food a week.
Right, the 7-day rule.
Give them carrots on Monday and feed them nothing but carrots and milk until next Monday. The logic was to isolate any potential allergic reaction. But the text says this is totally outdated and actually detrimental. Why is a week too cautious?
We have to look at the mechanics of building a diverse gut microbiome and preventing neophobia.
Neophobia.
Neophobia is the fear of new things, and it naturally peaks in human toddlers around age 2 as an evolutionary survival trait.
Wait, survival trait?
Yeah, it kept wandering toddlers from eating poisonous berries in the wild.
Oh, wow.
The modern approach is to introduce one new food every 2 to 3 days. Waiting a full 7 days is so slow that by the time the baby reaches that peak neophobic stage, they have only been exposed to a tiny fraction of available foods.
They haven't built a wide enough database of safe flavors.
Right. Massive modern studies have shown that early, rapid exposure to a wide spectrum of complex flavors and textures is one of the strongest predictors of preventing picky eating later in childhood.
And 2 to 3 days is still enough time to check for allergies.
Absolutely. A 2 to 3 day window is still plenty of time for the parent's naked eye to observe if a rash or a gastrointestinal issue develops, but it allows you to aggressively build their palate and diversify their gut flora.
Okay, I have a classic piece of grocery store aisle advice I need to run by you. I have heard this from aunts, grandmas, well-meaning strangers. You must feed babies bitter vegetables before you ever let them taste sweet fruits.
Ah, yes.
The theory goes that if a baby tastes a sweet pear first, their brain will get addicted to the sugar, and they will forever refuse to eat bitter broccoli. Is there any biological truth to this sequencing?
The source material explicitly dismantles this myth. It is biologically completely unfounded.
Really? Why?
You have to look at the baby's biological history before they even hit the high chair. What has the baby been exclusively consuming for the first 6 months of their life?
Breast milk or formula?
Breast milk or infant formula. Both of those liquids are incredibly sweet.
Are they?
Yes, human breast milk is exceptionally high in lactose, which is milk sugar. It is much sweeter than cow's milk.
I had no idea.
Furthermore, a fetus swallows amniotic fluid in the womb, and amniotic fluid takes on the flavor compounds of the mother's diet, often carrying sweet notes.
So they already know sweet.
Babies are literally born with an evolutionary hardwired preference for sweet flavors, because in nature, sweetness signals dense, safe, easily digestible energy.
So the idea that a puree of apples is going to suddenly introduce them to sugar and ruin their palate is nonsense. They already love sugar. The pear isn't going to break them.
It won't. Introducing a sweet potato or a banana first does not cause picky eating. The baby already prefers sweet.
Okay, so how do we get them to eat vegetables then?
The real physiological driver of whether a child will eventually accept bitter or savory vegetables is not the order of introduction, but the frequency of repeated exposure.
Let's dig into that mechanism. What happens when you give a baby broccoli for the first time?
They will almost certainly make a disgusted face, shudder, and spit it out.
Every time.
And this is where parents make a critical error. They interpret that physical reaction as a permanent character trait.
Like, oh, he hates broccoli.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They say, oh, he doesn't like broccoli, and they never serve it again. But the baby's reaction isn't a permanent dislike. It is a neurological shock to a novel, bitter compound.
Ah, because bitter usually means poison in the wild.
Right. The science of taste development shows that you have to offer that same piece of broccoli 5, 10, sometimes even 15 times in a low-pressure environment before the baby's brain stops flagging it as a potential toxin and categorizes it as safe and acceptable.
15 exposures just to get the brain to drop its defenses. That completely reframes the process. It's not about tricking them with vegetables first. It's about relentless, low-stress repetition to remap the brain's threat detection system.
Repetition is the only way to build the database.
Now, I want to pivot to the most stressful part of the menu.
The allergens.
The high-stakes items, allergens. Peanuts, eggs, dairy, wheat, soy, shellfish, tree nuts. As we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive, the rule used to be delay, delay, delay.
Sure.
Protect the fragile system. But our text highlights that the guidance has completely flipped. How did the medical community get this so wrong, and what is the new protocol?
It is arguably the most significant correction in pediatric immunology in the last few decades.
That's a huge statement.
But it's true. The old thinking was based on the assumption that an infant's immune system was too immature to handle complex proteins, and that keeping the allergen away would prevent the body from forming an allergy.
Makes logical sense on the surface.
It does. But a massive landmark clinical trial called the LAAP Study Learning Early about peanut allergy proved that the exact opposite was happening.
So by trying to build a protective moat around the child, the medical community accidentally starved the immune system of the exact training data it needed to recognize a peanut as safe.
That is precisely what happened. By delaying the introduction until age 2 or 3, we were presenting these highly complex proteins to an immune system that was already fully formed but completely naive to them.
Oh, wow.
The immune system panicked and treated the peanut protein like a deadly parasite, launching a massive inflammatory attack.
Which is the allergic reaction?
That attack is what we call an allergic reaction. The LAP study proved that early, consistent exposure actually trains the immune system toward tolerance.
How does that training work at a cellular level?
Right around that 6-month mark, when the gut lining is maturing and sealing those tight junctions we discussed earlier, there is a golden biological window of immune tolerance.
Okay, a window.
When you introduce a tiny controlled amount of a common allergen, say a quarter teaspoon of smooth peanut butter, thinned out with warm breast milk so it isn't a choking hazard, the gut absorbs the protein.
And what does the immune system do?
The immune system's regulatory T cells encounter it, analyze it, and basically file it in the safe everyday food category rather than producing the IgE antibodies that trigger anaphylaxis.
It's like handing the immune system's security guards a mugshot of the peanut protein and saying, hey, this is a friend, not an enemy. When you see this guy, let him through. Don't sound the alarm.
A perfect analogy. You are actively mapping the immune system's database. But the source text is very rigid on the safety protocols for how to execute this.
Right. You don't just hand a baby a handful of peanuts.
No. First, whole nuts are a lethal choking hazard, so allergens must be modified. Thinned peanut butter, powdered peanut mixed into oatmeal, or scrambled eggs.
Got it.
Second, you introduce one highly allergenic food at a time for several days in a row, so if there is a reaction, you know exactly the culprit.
And the timing of the day matters, right? The text says never at dinner.
Crucial point. You introduce a new allergen early in the day, preferably at breakfast.
Why is that?
If the baby's immune system does misfire, and they have a reaction, which can present as hives around the mouth, facial swelling, projectile vomiting, or wheezing, you want that baby awake, active, and right in front of you.
Oh, that makes sense.
You have time to monitor them, administer antihistamines if advised by a doctor, or call emergency services. If you give them peanut butter at 6 p.m. and put them in a dark crib at 7 p.m., a life-threatening reaction could unfold silently while you are in the other room.
That is terrifying. Safety protocols are paramount, but the broader takeaway is so empowering. Early, consistent exposure is an active form of biological protection.
Exactly.
And you have to keep it in the rotation. Right, you can't just give them a scrambled egg on Tuesday, declare them safe, and never feed them eggs again until they are 2.
The immune system requires ongoing reminders. If you establish tolerance, you have to maintain it by keeping the allergen in their weekly diet.
Okay, so knowing the science of what to feed them. Iron priority, flavor variety, early allergens, that's all intellectual. That's just building a grocery list.
True.
But the actual execution, the physical act of placing a tiny human being in a high chair and watching them try to process solid matter for the very first time, is where the real-life friction, the terror, and the absolute mess begin.
The trenches.
This takes us into the daily reality of feeding. And the source document addresses the major parental panics head-on. Let's start with the biggest one, the one that spikes a parent's heart rate to 180 beats per minute. Gagging versus choking.
This is the hardest part for most parents.
If you do baby-led weaning, or frankly, even if you give them slightly chunky puree, they are going to gag. And to an untrained adult, gagging looks like a medical emergency.
It is viscerally terrifying to witness. The baby's face turns bright red, their eyes water, they make awful coughing and sputtering sounds, their tongue thrusts out, and they might even vomit slightly.
It sounds horrible.
Every evolutionary instinct in a parent's body screams at them to intervene, to sweep the baby's mouth with a finger, to rip them out of the high chair and hit them on the back.
But the text insists that we have to fight that instinct. Why?
Because we have to understand the physiological mechanics of what is actually happening. The text demands that parents learn to distinguish between gagging and choking, because they are entirely different events.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Gagging is a normal, highly effective neurological learning reflex. It is the baby's cranial nerves doing exactly what they're supposed to do, preventing an overly large piece of food from migrating too far back into the airway.
So they're protecting themselves.
Yes, when a baby gags, they are actively working the problem out. They're using their tongue and throat muscles to force the object forward. They're learning the spatial boundaries of their own mouth.
And the defining characteristic of a gag is that it is loud.
Yes. Noise is the sound of air moving. If the baby is coughing, sputtering, and crying, their airway is open. Airflow is happening.
What about choking?
Choking, on the other hand, is a mechanical blockage.
It is silent.
It is a true life-threatening emergency. The airway is completely occluded. The baby cannot cough, they cannot cry, they cannot draw breath, and their face will quickly begin to turn blue or ashen pale, not bright red.
Okay, so loud and red means go ahead. Silent and blue means rescue. But what happens if a parent panics during a routine gag? What if the baby is noisy and red, working out a piece of banana, and the parent gasps, reaches in, and tries to hook the food out with their finger?
2 very bad things happen. Mechanically, an adult finger is huge compared to an infant's airway.
Right.
By trying to sweep the mouth, the parent is highly likely to accidentally push the piece of food past the gag receptors and wedge it directly into the windpipe, actively causing the very choking event they were trying to prevent.
Oh, wow. So intervening physically endangers them.
Yes. And psychologically, if the parent gasps, exhibits sheer panic, and rips the food away, they transfer that terror directly to the baby's nervous system.
They learn that eating is scary.
They turn a routine, productive, sensory learning experience into a trauma. The baby learns that food is dangerous and mealtime is a source of panic. The hardest discipline of early feeding is sitting on your hands, keeping a calm face, and letting the baby's neurological reflexes do their job.
That is profound. We have to override our own panic to allow their biology to function. Okay, another huge friction point the text brings up is volume expectations.
Volume.
How much should this baby actually be consuming? Because we prepare these beautiful plates of food and we imagine they are going to crush a whole jar of peas.
The expectation gap here is the source of so much unnecessary stress.
I can imagine.
The text notes that at the beginning of the solids journey, a mathematically successful meal might literally consist of 1 or 2 teaspoons of food actually making it down the esophagus.
1 or 2 teaspoons, that's biologically negligible.
Nutritionally, it is a rounding error, but developmentally, it is a massive accomplishment.
How so?
Because for the entire first year of life, breast milk or infant formula remains the primary engine for nutrition and calories. Solid foods are supplemental, they're practiced. Parents agonize that the baby only took 2 bites and threw the rest on the floor, assuming the baby will starve. But those 2 bites provided the necessary oral motor practice, the sensory exposure, and the tiny hit of iron. The milk provides the bulk of the fuel.
Speaking of liquids, when do they get water? I see babies with those tiny silicone cups all the time.
Around 6 months, you can introduce very small amounts of water in an open cup or a straw cup, not a sippy cup, by the way, which suppresses tongue movement.
Oh, good tip.
But again, this is strictly for mechanical practice. It is about learning the complex motor skills of lip closure and pacing a liquid swallow. It is not for hydration.
Wait, really? Not for hydration?
Breast milk and formula are highly hydrating. If you fill a baby's tiny grape-sized stomach with water, you take up valuable real estate that should be reserved for nutrient-dense milk.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. And what about flavoring the food? Are we restricted to bland boiled mush?
Not at all, and this is another great myth to bust. The olfactory bulb, the part of the brain that processes smell and flavor, thrives on stimulation.
So spices are okay.
Babies can and absolutely should have spices. Cinnamon mixed into oatmeal, a dash of cumin on roasted carrots, garlic powder on pureed chicken.
That sounds delicious.
Right. Expanding their flavor profile prepares them to eat the complex meals your family actually eats. What you must strictly avoid are 2 things: salt and sugar.
Why salt? We need sodium to live.
We do, but an infant's kidneys are structurally immature. They cannot effectively filter high levels of sodium.
Oh.
A high-salt diet can literally overwhelm their renal system, and sugar offers absolutely no nutritional value while displacing the foods that do.
The text also has a giant flashing red light about honey. I remember learning this, but I want to know the mechanics. Why is honey perfectly safe for me, but lethal for a baby?
It comes down to infant botulism.
Botulism.
Yeah. Honey, especially raw honey, naturally contains the dormant spores of a bacterium called Clostridium botulinum. When an adult or an older child eats honey, the highly acidic environment of our mature stomachs, combined with a robust, densely populated gut microbiome, simply crushes those spores before they can do anything.
We just digest it.
Right. But an infant's stomach is less acidic, and their gut flora is still developing. If those spores enter an infant's digestive tract, they find a hospitable environment.
And they multiply.
They germinate, multiply, and produce the botulinum toxin, which attacks the nervous system and causes rapid muscle paralysis.
That is terrifying.
It is a severe, life-threatening medical emergency. Absolutely no honey before the first birthday, when the gut finally matures enough to defend itself.
Fascinating. It all goes back to the mechanics of the gut lining. Okay, here is where it gets incredibly interesting to me regarding the daily reality. The mess.
Oh, the mess.
The sheer, unadulterated chaos of a baby eating. We look at a baby covered head to toe in avocado, violently rubbing yogurt into their eyeballs, dropping pasta on the floor to watch the dog eat it, and we see a failure.
We see a huge cleanup.
We see a laundry disaster. We see bad manners. But the text frames this entirely differently. It frames the high chair as a sensory laboratory.
It is one of the most vital reframings in the entire document. Clean baby does not equal successful feeding.
I want that embroidered on a pillow. What is actually happening when they are destroying my kitchen?
When an adult eats, it is utilitarian. We use a fork, we chew, we swallow, we wipe our mouths. We already know the physics of the food.
Right.
But a baby has never encountered these physics. They are experiencing the physical properties of matter with all 5 senses for the very first time.
So they're exploring.
When a baby grabs a fistful of mashed banana, squeezes it until it oozes through their fingers, smears it across the plastic tray, and then drops a piece on the floor, they are not misbehaving. They are not trying to make you angry. They are acting as little scientists gathering data.
They're running physics experiments. They are testing gravity, cause and effect, temperature, viscosity.
Exactly. They are building proprioception, the awareness of where their body parts are in space. They are asking, is this cold? Is it squishy? Does it require a hard bite or a soft bite? If I drop it, what sound does it make? Does mom pick it up? This tactile feedback maps the sensory cortex of the brain.
And what happens if a parent interrupts that?
If a parent is constantly hovering with a damp wipe, frantically wiping the baby's mouth after every single spoonful, preventing them from touching the food to keep their outfit clean, the parent is short-circuiting that crucial sensory learning.
You are creating tactile defensiveness. You are teaching their nervous system that being messy is alarming, and by extension, exploring new textures is bad.
Precisely. Put the wipe down until the meal is over.
That is a hard habit for neat freak adults to break. The text also points out a massive blind spot parents have regarding the baby's daily appetite.
The nonlinear appetite.
Yes.
Adults generally operate on a linear caloric schedule. We eat 3 meals a day, roughly the same volume, day in and day out. We project that expectation onto babies.
We expect them to eat more every week.
We expect them to linearly increase their intake week by week. But an infant's appetite is wildly, maddeningly unpredictable.
Because they don't grow linearly, they grow in explosive spurts.
Correct. The hypothalamus in the brain regulates appetite based on immediate physiological needs. One day, a baby might eat an entire scrambled egg, half a banana, and a strip of toast.
And the parent feels like a hero.
The parent is thrilled. The very next day, they might lock their lips, turn their head, throw the egg on the floor, and refuse to consume anything but milk.
And the parent panics.
The parent immediately panics. They think, what did I do wrong? Is he sick? Did I break his eating habits?
But the source text outlines all the invisible variables driving that refusal. Teething pain making their gums throb, a massive cognitive developmental leap distracting them, poor sleep the night before, or simply the fact that they aren't in an active growth spurt that day.
The vital advice here is to zoom out. You cannot evaluate a baby's nutritional success on a meal-by-meal basis or even a day-by-day basis.
How do you evaluate it then?
You must look at their intake over the course of an entire week. Over a 7-day period, if they are offered a variety of foods and they're generally energetic, producing wet diapers, and following their growth curve, they are fine. You must trust their internal regulation.
So we're navigating the terrifying gagging reflexes, we're forcing ourselves to ignore the catastrophic sensory mess, we're trusting the wild swings of their appetite. This chaotic, messy day-to-day reality isn't just about getting calories into a stomach, is it?
Not at all.
It is actively laying the psychological foundation for the rest of their life. And that brings us to the deepest layer of the source material, the long game, the psychology, trust, and the fundamental philosophy of feeding.
This is where we move past the biological machinery of tight gut junctions and iron absorption and look at the human element. Early feeding is fundamentally about establishing a lifelong relationship with food.
Which is incredibly heavy. Everyone listening to this has a relationship with food, and for many of us, it is fraught with guilt, restriction, or emotional baggage.
Exactly. What happens in the microenvironment of that high chair introduces 3 profound psychological concepts to a newly conscious human being.
What's the first one?
The first is agency. The realization that I am a separate entity from my mother, I can choose what goes into my body, and my no will be respected.
Wow. And the second?
The second is trust. The realization that this new overwhelming sensory experience is safe, and my caregiver will provide for me without forcing or tricking me.
And the third?
And the third is curiosity. The realization that the world is full of varied, interesting things to discover.
And the text stresses that the tool to achieve this is something called responsive feeding. And it emphasizes that responsive feeding is far more important than the specific feeding camp BLW or purees that you belong to. What does responsive feeding actually look like in practice?
It means following the baby's cues and entirely removing pressure from the equation.
Okay.
You provide the structure. You decide what food is offered, where it is offered, and when it is offered. But the baby decides if they will eat it and how much.
Zero pressure.
Zero pressure. No airplane noises forcing a spoon past tight lips. No bargaining. No, just one more bite for mommy. If they turn their head away or sign all done, the meal is over. You respect their bodily autonomy.
And crucially, the text says responsive feeding means eating with them.
Modeling the behavior is the most powerful teaching tool you possess. Humans are social eaters.
Right.
If a baby sees you genuinely enjoying a piece of broccoli, their mirror neurons fire, and they are infinitely more likely to view that green object as safe and desirable.
Rather than sitting there staring at them.
If instead you are just hovering over them with a plastic spoon, staring at them intensely while you drink a cold coffee, you are isolating them.
Okay, let's tie the psychology back to the biology because I have a big question. Let's say a parent does everything right mechanically.
Okay, perfect mechanics.
They wait for the biological slot machine to hit at 6 months. They manage the iron drop perfectly. They offer the optimal hybrid of purees and soft spears. They introduce the peanut butter safely early in the morning.
Sounds great.
But internally, the parent is a wreck. They are sweating. They are white-knuckling the table, terrified the baby's going to choke on a blueberry, agonizing over the fact that they only ate 1 teaspoon, internally screaming about the avocado mashed into the carpet. Does the baby's body register that hidden stress?
This is perhaps the most sobering insight in the entire biological breakdown.
Yes.
The baby's nervous system absolutely registers it.
Really?
A parent's energetic state becomes the child's environment.
Explain the mechanics of that. How does my anxiety stop them from eating?
Babies are highly attuned, co-regulating organisms. They rely on the adults around them to regulate their own nervous systems.
Okay.
If an adult approaches mealtime like a high-stakes medical procedure, radiating tension, hovering, and staring intensely, the baby's nervous system will mirror that anxiety.
They absorb it.
They will shift from the parasympathetic nervous system, which is literally the rest and digest state, into the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight state.
And you can't digest food if you're preparing to fight a tiger.
Precisely the opposite. When cortisol and adrenaline flood the baby's system due to the tension in the room, blood flow is diverted away from the digestive tract and toward the muscles.
Wow.
The digestive enzymes slow down, their appetite suppresses. You cannot curiously explore a new, bitter texture when your body feels threatened.
That is wild.
The tension becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. They will associate the high chair and the act of eating with stress.
So the emotional vibe of the kitchen is actually more biologically important than the vitamin content of the puree.
In the long game, absolutely. The source emphasizes that repetition without pressure, calmly offering the food, observing what the baby does with it, and peacefully moving on regardless of the outcome is the ultimate secret weapon.
Calm consistency.
A calm, curious feeding environment where a child eats mediocre food beats a perfectly executed nutritional spreadsheet served in an environment of high anxiety every single time.
Speaking of nutritional spreadsheets, before we move to wrap up this massive topic, I do want to drop one incredibly high-impact biochemical hack the text provided, just a quick tool for parents. It's about iron absorption.
The vitamin C mechanism. It's brilliant.
Right. If you serve a food high in non-heme iron, which is the plant-based iron found in lentils, beans, or fortified grain oatmeal, the human body actually struggles to absorb it efficiently.
It needs help.
But if you pair it with a food high in vitamin C, like serving the lentils with the tomato sauce, or giving them a puree of strawberries alongside the oatmeal, a chemical reaction happens.
It's a great trick.
The ascorbic acid in the vitamin C literally binds to the iron, changing its structure and drastically unlocking the amount the baby's gut can absorb. I just thought that was such a practical, empowering little mechanism for parents to leverage.
It's a wonderful biochemical trick to maximize efficiency. But we must remember, it is just a tool in the toolbox. The overarching philosophy of the entire text remains. A good enough approach to nutrition, executed consistently in a loving, low-pressure environment, will always trump a perfect nutritional mechanism executed with rigidity and fear.
Okay, we have covered an immense landscape today. Let's synthesize the mechanics of this journey. We started by looking past the illusion of the 6-month calendar date, breaking down the biological slot machine of readiness,
The fading of the tongue thrust reflex,
the postural core strength required for airway safety,
the migration of the sensory gag reflex.
and the cellular sealing of the gut lining. We navigated the evolutionary paradox of the iron clock, understanding how to use bridge solutions safely without rushing physical development.
We waded through the great divide of purees versus baby-led weaning, discovering that the hybrid approach honors both the parent's need for nutritional assurance and the infant's neurological need for fine motor mapping.
We dismantled multi-generational myths, learning that early, rapid flavor variety prevents neophobia, and diving deep into the iLeap study to understand how early allergen exposure actively trains the immune system's T cells toward tolerance.
We embraced the friction of the high chair. We learned to differentiate the loud red safety of a learning gag reflex from the silent blue emergency of choking.
We reframed a catastrophic physical mess as a vital brain-mapping sensory laboratory. We acknowledged the wild swings of the hypothalamus-driven appetite. And finally, we zoomed all the way out to the nervous system, recognizing that we aren't just filling a stomach, we are building a foundation of trust and bodily agency.
It is a profound transition. As we noted at the beginning, it's the physical and psychological shift from reflex-driven survival to intentional, autonomous interaction with the world.
It really is the beginning of raising a person. Now, to close us out, you always look at the data and leave us with a broader question to chew on. What is the final lingering thought for our listener to mull over today?
Well, we spent this entire hour discussing the intricate biology of how the baby learns, adapts, and functions.
Right.
But I think the real revelation buried in this text is about us, the adults. We just established that a baby's nervous system co-regulates with ours, meaning our internal anxiety becomes the child's physical environment.
Yeah, that was huge.
So I would offer this thought for the listener. When you find yourself gripping that feeding spoon too tightly, obsessing over the exact ounce count, or feeling your heart rate spike because avocado is smeared on the floor, how much of that intense need to control the baby's feeding is actually just a reflection of your own unresolved, rigid rules about food?
Oh, wow.
Rules or anxieties that you absorbed in your own childhood. In those tense moments at the high chair, we have to pause and ask ourselves a very hard question. Are we actually feeding the baby's biological needs? Or are we just feeding our own deep-seated need for control?
Wow. Are we feeding the baby's needs or feeding our own need for control? That is a mirror I think a lot of us, parents or not, need to look into regarding how we approach caregiving.
It's definitely something to think about.
Because in the end, it turns out that raising a human isn't a mechanical, linear process. It is a biological ecosystem. It is messy, it is unpredictable, and it requires you to be entirely present in the chaos of it all.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. Remember, the simple fact that you are here, listening, asking these complex questions, and bringing this level of curiosity to the mechanics of human life already puts you in an incredible position to adapt and thrive. Until next time.